this important theme is Prof. Admayamare and the CEO of IEC, Mr. Sai Mamabulo, whom I would like them to introduce themselves briefly.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. My name is Admaya Mare. I'm an associate professor and head of Department of Communication and Media here at the University of Johannesburg. It's nice to be here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bongani. My name is Sai Mamabolo. I work for the IEC as Chief Electoral Officer, and I'm happy to be part of the discussion this afternoon. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And well, going straight into it, we understand that fake news is very common, is a common phrase lately. And right now, since we're heading towards elections, we have a lot of mis and disinformation, which we'd like to unpack. And Prof. Mara, I would like to start with you. Can you tell us a bit more about distinctions and unique risks of mis and disinformation? Also, quickly on that, thank you for joining us, Masa. I'm sure if you are here with us for the other sessions, you've met Zimasa as a content creator. Getting back to my question, Prof, can you please take us on that?
Thank you so much, Bongani. So when we talk about misinformation, we are talking about the spreading of false and misleading information. And most often, when we're talking about that, it's not really about whether somebody is done deliberately or they want to cause harm or what. But when we talk about disinformation, we are talking about the deliberate spreading of false and misleading information with the intention to cause harm. And that's when it becomes more dangerous. And I think when we are getting into elections, oftentimes, our focus is not more on misinformation. We are more worried about what happens when people willfully and purposefully try and spread misinformation or information that is false, also misleading, aimed at actually causing harm and actually despondence, especially in society.
Yes, thank you for that. And I just want to understand it in the IEC perspective. Mr. Mamabulo, can you take us through how maybe mis or disinformation has evolved in recent years?
Thank you very much. I think in order to answer that question, one has to have an appreciation that the bulk of the election campaigning 2 elections ago would have happened differently. Today, the election is fought on social media platforms. So, in fact, there are people who still refer to social media as being different from mainstream media. Social media is now mainstream, is the primary mode in which people converse, is the primary mode in which people engage politically and socially. So with that changed the types of digital harm that we can experience. And the most pernicious of all is generative AI. We never used to have that 5 years ago, but today it's a great possibility where my voice, my picture can be used and fraudulently, but it be created as if is the authentic, genuine Sai Mamavolo saying voting stations are going to close at 4, when in fact they're going to be closing at 9. So that's the most, if you like, the most gross and destructive version of disinformation is one that has its genesis in generative AI.
And indeed. Well, Zimasa, if we speak of digital platforms, it is actually your space. So we just want to understand, how have you seen it manifest online, and have you noticed any changes in recent years?
So I think what is really, what's become interesting is, and I mentioned it yesterday, we're seeing that it hasn't kicked off yet in a big wave. What you normally see is, you see a lot of bot accounts start to what they call astroturfing, which is basically to just go into comment sections of any political party and basically steer the conversation negatively or just disrupt the conversation from normal people. And what that happens, what that actually does as a result, you find that when most people get into they see a post, it attracts them, they read it, they want to see genuine comments, right? That's what actually gives them an understanding. So let's say you see a post about something about political party A, and you want to know, I wonder what the discourse is around this. When you go in, you would like to see people that are having normal discourse around that topic. What then happens is that with bot accounts and astroturfing, they flood that account. So suddenly people become disinterested. They don't know what the real opinion is on that. So they also feel like they're closed off. So that's something that's always been happening. It happened a lot even under Bell Pottinger, Cambridge Analytica times, but it hasn't started yet. So at the moment, you're seeing political parties having a more safer digital space. Platforms like X have got centers. TikTok definitely has a an election center where they're also looking for this, because it also happens on TikTok as well, where there's a video, someone is trying to give information, and then in the comments you're seeing a lot of fake accounts, a lot of bot accounts. But I think in this election so far, it's been contained, because more often than not, if you go into any sort of the main accounts of the political parties, you're able to still see comments, real comments of people asking questions. So what does this mean about this, etc.? And which is what you want. You want that digital space to be a space where people's political questions, economic questions, social questions can still be answered by the political parties themselves. And when people want to pose manifesto questions on digital platforms, that is a faster way and medium for them to do so. So for now, I think it's still open, but we don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. And we're hoping that platforms like TikTok have those safeguards in place so that it doesn't disrupt.
Indeed, indeed. I actually appreciate the fact that right now it is contained, but I also want to find out, maybe let's compare it with the previous elections. Prof. Mara, I want to bring you in on this. How do you think the manifestation of fake news has occurred, comparing the current elections that we're heading to and the previous elections that we have experienced?
Awesome. Thanks. So I think I just want to piggyback on what the CEO of the Independent Electoral Commission has just said, that we are getting into an election where generative AI is going to play a major role. And of course, it has not really been that very disruptive so far. But I think if you remember what we've seen in the last few weeks, there was a video that was circulating around, Trump, Trump, literally endorsing a certain political party and saying that, we have already seen. So people's voices, people's images being used, and the manipulation that is coming on that space, I think that's what makes it so different from the previous elections that we have seen. Yes, social media has been here for some time. It's almost like 20 years now with social media. But what we have seen, especially as we go into this particular election, is that generative AI is pretty much the disruptive effect. And I think we really need to see how maybe working with platform companies, but also working with fact-checking organizations, how that can be nipped in the bud. Because if we don't nip that in the bud, I think it can actually cloud and also pollute our public sphere as we get into the elections.
Indeed. And I want to bring in Mr. Mamabulo on this. Of course, we're still trailing back on history on the previous elections and heading to the ballot box now. What are some of the challenges that you have seen so far by institutions like government to counter the threat of misinformation or disinformation? As you mentioned, that the generative AI poses a great threat to society right now. So are there efforts that maybe government and other organizations are taking?
Yes, there are efforts, but I think as a country we are a little bit way behind, at least at the public policy level. The African Union, the European Union, institutions such as those, they have policy frameworks that are already adopted. South Africa is beginning the conversation. So we're coming in a bit late as a country. The recent initiative by the Film and Publication Board had to be reversed because there was a threat of litigation. Again, setting us back. But of course, the difficulty here is that as a public institution, you've got to be careful not to erode the inherent freedoms of people, whilst you provide a framework to protect against digital harms. So there are efforts. The IC on its own has partnered with some of the platforms. We've signed a collaboration agreement, and that collaboration agreement is oftentimes mischaracterized to say the IC is partnering with platforms to negate the freedoms of people. That here is to silence people, so to speak. it is not so. In fact, the argument itself says that it is predicated on the advancement of the freedom of speech of people. In other words, the intention is to weed out digital harms, disinformation, malinformation, and those types of instances, whilst giving people the opportunity to enjoy the usage of social media platforms and thereby expressing themselves.
And I just want to bring you in, Zamaso, on this. Because there's really a fine line between what is true and what is fake in this modern day, especially on digital platforms. I just want you to take me through if maybe your audience that you have on the platform, are they aware of, or are they able to identify misinformation or disinformation and that such?
That's such a great question. Of late, what I've found to be quite negative is that when people are generally out of an election cycle, when people are interacting on social media platforms, what you start to find is that if the discourse is generally negative, people start to become negative even to the truth. It's a very interesting thing, because remember, a lot of people will see an article, and maybe out of those people who see the article, maybe 10% click through, and that's a high click through rate. You're probably looking at 1 or 2% click through. In fact, one of the key things that a platform like X did was that it used to ask you, have you read the article before you retweet it, right? It used to be a thing, because maybe you've seen the headline and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, you agree with it. Or you're saying, no. Immediately that emotive response, it had a barrier. So what's happened of late is that now what you're finding is that, very case in point, very interesting case in point, State of the Nation, a lot of younger people didn't watch. So the very next day, I released a 1 and a 2 part, literally taking the speech and doing a summarization of the speech. People started saying it's fake news. I was so disturbed. I was like, were you guys not watching yesterday? And I realized they actually weren't. They weren't watching yesterday. So to them, when because there is an emotive response that says, no, this didn't happen, or this is all a lie, right? And this is what we were getting. And I was thinking to myself, anybody who's watched the speech, but then eventually, I think 2 or 3 days later, you found that people started to say, but guys, this is literally a summarization of the speech. So why is it such a big thing? And that's where the negativity is. Once you've turned people to be inherently negative to positivity, like what we're seeing in South Africa, you find that anybody who says something is as it is must be questioned unless that something that they're saying aligns with the person who's hearing it. And that is where we've headed. From 2016 until now, this is a trend that happens. And maybe this is also one of those catalytic things that's maybe pushing the polarization of people far right and far left.
And Prof, identifying like how Zmasa is actually saying it, the problem that he has identified, how then do we equip media users and people to actually at least to do their very best to understand and try to disseminate, to take the truth out of information that has been given unto them?
Yeah, so I think one thing that is very important is to make sure that media literacy becomes very, very important in terms of rolling out media literacy campaigns across society. So as kids start at school, they should be exposed to some of these things to know what is truthful and what is not, but also to just be able to do basic fact checking. You must be able to check who is the author of this particular thing. What is the source of this particular thing that you also need to check your own biases, because sometimes we bring our own biases to the equation and then we complicate everything. So we really need to fact check content, but also we need to make sure that we know where this particular information is coming from. What are the interests of these particular people that are pushing this particular agenda? Is it not manipulated content? Is it not fabricated content that is being pushed? We need to question all those things. Unfortunately, sometimes if it agrees with our own stereotypes, if it agrees with our own worldview, we often run with it and we think it is true. And I think that is where the problem really is.
Yes, and in the IEC perspective, are there any initiatives that are probably also trying to roll out media literacy and help people actually get the truth? I know the website of the IEC actually gives accurate information about the current state of the elections that we're heading to, but are there other initiatives that you guys have there?
Yes, indeed, and some of them are in partnership with the platforms themselves. For instance, you made reference to the election center on TikTok. The idea behind that center is to give people correct information about how to register, who's entitled to register, how to vote, the three types of ballots that are going to be used, and when the voting stations open, special votes, all that type of information, it's available from that election center. So if you go to other platforms, there are variations of that where people can, but I think that the two gentlemen are making a very important point that you can better interpret disinformation if you are informed yourself. And unfortunately, social media has encouraged a national psyche where you can comment without really understanding the issue,
Yes.
really engaging and researching the issue, and therefore commenting from a position of information. And that's something not just about elections, but generally about everything else in society, that we need to be careful that we are informed before we prefer any idea, before we prefer any stance on the matter. And especially in those who are living within an academic environment such as this, it is important that you really have an understanding of the issue, preferably from all perspectives. And then once you've had all perspectives, then to form your own independent mind and then comments thereafter.
I just want to add to what the chief is saying. What's also quite interesting is that algorithms play a very strong part in how and what we consume. So, for instance, I'll make an example. Palestine-Israel content. I consume a lot of it. So it's figured out what my stance is on it, and it feeds me that information. But I'm aware of it, right? So I realize, I say, oh, okay, cool. This is a clip of Piers Morgan talking to a spokesperson from the Israeli government, but it's giving me because it knows this is something that Uzmasa is likely to like, to share, to bookmark and save. So there is that thing that says that the polarization of society on social media is also being catalyzed by the algorithms and the need for the algorithms to keep you there, right? And that's one of the things that I believe should be the conversations from the IEC to say, more so in South Africa, when there is a clip. So for instance, I'll make an example and don't leave the party. Let's say, okay, a particular party, it's green, right? This party's content on a particular platform, I have not seen. I have not, and not to say that I don't consume that type of content, but I have not seen it. So we need to also have that conversation around the impact that platforms play relative to how they are operating and how they want to work and how they want to keep us glued to the screens.
And I want to hold you on that, Zimas. So now, of course, the algorithm is playing a big role, but also creators themselves, they also feed the audience information.
100%.
So I just want to understand the role of the content creators themselves. You know, I was scrolling through TikTok this other time and I saw a podcast where people are now speaking about that should a certain party win, Cape Town becomes a country, you know, such information. So being informed from the creators themselves and how can you stimulate that, that they become a key role in us being informed in an authentic manner.
So I think what's very interesting, and I'm just putting it out there, I think before election day, or at least before the week, whether it's a webinar, whether it's a platform like this, whether it's, we need to bring creators into the room. It's going to be critical. Today I was listening to people trying to explain what a spoiled ballot was, and I cringed. I said, yo, we've got a problem. Because what's also going to be quite important is that in those last few days, you're going to start seeing tricks, right, from nefarious actors. They're going to start telling people that ballot boxes, the counting is off, etc. It's not opening at 7 in the morning or at 6 in the morning. At this station, this is happening on the day. We need to have creators not being inflamed as catalysts, because the problem is not the first person who posts it. It's the next person who retweets it without fact checking, and then it finally eventually lands onto someone's lap who's got 2, 3, 4 million views. They get incensed, they make a video, and then on the day we're thinking everything is burning when absolutely nothing has happened. Now that detracts from the work that the IEC has to do, which is to just make sure that people vote properly, we count properly, we report results properly. Now suddenly it's crisis management time. So I think as a almost like as a way of countering that, we should have a seminar, and we invite a platform like TikTok should invite these people on a webinar, everybody in South Africa with any sort of clout, so that we can fact check each other as creators. Say, no, you're wrong there, and you're wrong because X, Y, Z. So yeah, we should try that.
Yeah, it's actually one of the things that came up in the previous session, that accountability is important and holding people to their word so that they explain where they're coming from. And I want to bring in Prof. Mario on this in terms of collaboration is a key thing that Zimasa has mentioned. I just want for us to identify key stakeholders adding to the ones that Zimasa has mentioned, and how can they work together effectively. Of course, there's no absolute way to work, but how can we at least try and work this out?
Yeah, certainly. So dealing with misinformation and disinformation requires a multi-stakeholder approach. I certainly agree with that. So political parties right now are very important, because they are also major, producers and disseminators of misinformation, especially during elections. We also need to make sure that platform companies, because now, as the CEO was saying, social media has now become the theater upon which most of these electoral campaigns are playing themselves out. So we really need to make sure that platforms are there. But the media, mainstream media, also still needs to be part of it. The creators like Zimasa here, they also need to be part of it. Civil society also need to be in it. But even the ordinary voter, I think the ordinary voter is and still remains one of the key variables in this equation, because they play an important role, because if they are not well informed about things, they can actually be able to share it with their own colleagues, share it with their own friends. And remember, we are Africans. Oftentimes, everything that we share within our social networks. And once we share it within our social networks, it can go viral, and it can actually affect the way in which we see the election that is going to come.
Yes, indeed. And now this question goes to all of you gentlemen. We'll start with Mr. Mamabulo there. Well, looking past the elections, the ever-growing importance of digital space in people's lives means that this will remain an important issue. So I just want you to help me identify what steps do you think we'll need to take together to address the theme that we're talking about today.
Well, first of all, South Africa remains a country of uneven development. There are sections of society that are well-resourced, some of them, in fact, with free public access to data and things like those. So one of the critical things confronting us as a country is to equalize access to the digital economy. Because the uneven development or uneven access gives certain sections of the population more voice than the other. So it is quite crucial that as a country, we open up access for everybody. In fact, in one of the State of the Nation addresses, I don't think it's the one that was delivered this year, perhaps one before, the president indicated that each household needs to get 10 gigs of data per month for free. And that is important because data is no longer a privileged thing. It's a basic human commodity. It's as basic as access to water. So I think as a country, we've got to address that question, to open access to the digital economy.
I think one of the most important things going into the future is finding a way to integrate digital into real life. And maybe let me say, we need to start to bring a lot more, because the youth are a lot more digital. The opportunity for mass participation of the youth in electoral processes using safeguards like blockchains, etc., is going to be something that we need to start to look at, because I know that the 14 million people who are youth and who aren't registered or aren't voting, etc., can be tapped if you said to him, look, here's your ID, your digital ID, plug it into this thing, safeguard one device, you verify your device like a bank account, because we already use money, right? We already have cards on our phones, right? And money is very important to people. And voting is very important to people. We can find a way to make the system secure. And then you say to those people, look, you can either come into the ballot to vote, you can either mail in, or you can come in via, if you're overseas, etc., you can go to overseas embassies, etc., and consulates, like we have, or you can vote digitally via the blockchain, but you need to be pre-verified. Suddenly, those 14 million people, you've created an ease of access to voting for them on their phones. But remember, you don't have to tell those people a lot about how it's going to work, in the sense that they would reject it. You tell them this is how it's going to work, and they would be more amenable to say, I might not want to go to a station, but I've pre-verified my phone, and on the day it's going to open for an hour on my phone a portal that I can verify using facial identification, the same face ID that's on my phone, or finger ID, and it's going to then give me a ballot, I vote on it. This is where we should go. Then we would have eliminated all challenges that are in the way of the youth participating, because they participate on their phones doing crazy things. We should be opening an opportunity for them to do their civic duty on their phone. So I think post-election, this is where we should be looking to create a safer, safeguarded space where people can actually, the younger people can be involved and vote and ultimately exercise their civic duty.
Yes, Prof. Well, it's your turn now. Please also share your comments on the future. Where are we heading now?
Certainly, I think the future is pretty much digital, as my colleagues have already pointed out. I think we need to find ways in which we make participation, civic participation, much more accessible, especially for young people. Yesterday, we were talking about 14 million people that are not even, participating in all these civic duties. And I think it's very important to find ways in which we meet them. Let's meet them at their point of need, where they are. Where are they? Let's ask ourselves, where are these young people, and how can we reach them where they are, so that we can give them access to playing civic duties in their own. I'm not that kind of a person who believes, like, for example, if you go to Australia, for example, they would say that, it's something that is actually, you are supposed to go to, you are supposed to vote. It's actually legislated that if you don't vote, it's a criminal offense. I don't think we should go there, but I think we should make it much more easier and accessible for young people to say, I am going to do this civic duty because it means a lot. If I don't vote, I have voted because the other person who is going to vote is going to decide my future, or is going to decide what South Africa is going to look like going into the future. So we need to find ways, and I think the digital space becomes one way in which we can actually make it much more easier. I know on the part of the Electoral Commission, it can become more cumbersome. It's also maybe expensive for now, but I think it's a homework for them as they go into the future to say, how can we make that much more easier so that young people can become part of the civic processes?
And the word young people has been a buzz here. And where are young people? We have empty spaces, we can't see young people, but I want us to turn to the audience now. Get them more involved in this conversation. Young people, where are you? Answer the question. So right now, I would like to take questions from the audience. Of course, we've been speaking from different perspectives, but can we get some questions from you guys to be involved in this conversation? Thank you. There's a hand out there. Well, it's like young people are very, very quiet. While the mic is going that side, I'm a young person, right? I'm going to be voting for it's going to be my second vote. That sounds okay, yeah. So I'm going to be voting for my second time. I'm very excited about it, but the key thing has been being informed. I haven't been much informed about how to make an informed decision. But let's have your questions over there.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelly from the Department of Communications and Media here at DJ. So mine is actually a general question open to everyone. Is misinformation and disinformation a cybersecurity threat?
Okay. Who's going to take this one first? Okay.
Yes, it is. So I'll give you a perfect example of why I say yes. If you go back to the riots a couple of years ago, one of the key catalysts of it, there were two catalysts of the riots. The riots were happening, but specifically news coverage. News coverage was a problem for me. And maybe this is me becoming heavily conservative. There's a line between reporting and showing acts of vandalism that catalyze more acts of vandalism. And maybe I should be working for the SSA. But the problem I see with that is that I walked into a shop in Johannesburg, and all of the TVs at this retail store were playing riots in Pietermaritzburg. And the people in the store, you know, you stop and there's a moment. So it's at that moment where I'm worried that at that point, that medium or that media is actually catalyzing more people to riot, right? That's one. Two, on social media for the riots, you suddenly started to see a groundswell of people thinking to themselves, if people are doing this, why shouldn't we do it? Yes, it's a fine line, I know, right? And with great power comes great responsibility. But when we're trying to protect assets, the country, and all of these things, we've got to ask ourselves the question, at some point, do we not then move to credible news and then we block the hashtag? I don't know, right? This is something that we've got to ask ourselves, because you're suddenly starting to see a young person who's sitting at home and sees the hashtag and says, oh, looting, PMB looting. They're in Pietermaritzburg, it's on their phone, they go, Aibo, this is most like 2 streets up from me. People are getting TVs. When you start to limit the damage, and you've got to play it by case, right? It's very destructive. And when you go to false information, there were points and times where people would say something is happening at a particular place and nothing is happening, but people would go there and do that said thing that apparently must have been happening there. So, and that in itself is fake news and disinformation. So we've got to sit back and ask ourselves, at what point is it completely destructive? Because people always tell lies, that's fine. I mean, but it's at a point where it catalyzes action that I start to go, ooh, that's a problem. And also herd mentality, right? Where that digital feeds into real life. So it is a problem. I think it's something that we need to possibly even legislate properly against. But obviously, we still want to keep people's freedoms. But at the same time, we know when we have a serious situation, and we need to have safeguards for it.
Any different perspectives?
Not quite. Zimase has dealt with the one dimension to the question. The other dimension is cybersecurity from the point of view of the malicious intrusion of a network with a view to distorting the information on that network. Now, when you prepare an event as major as an election, there are certain safeguards you've got to take to ensure that your network cannot be externally intruded, because the implications of any intrusions are far-reaching for the credibility of the process. So there's that element as well, over and above the fact that social media platform could be used to propagate circumstances of violence such as we've seen in 2021.
Thank you. Prof, you want to add? Okay. Any questions? Okay, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Rufile Mofokeng, and I'm a student at the Department of Communication and Media. So I have question is for Mr. Mamabolo. Are there any strategies to eradicate the ongoing problems with missing ballot papers and all of that? And I'd like to appreciate the point that you made, Mr. Zimasa, about digitizing um, future votes. And this falls into the second question. Is this misinformation or disinformation that if we don't vote, the votes automatically go to the ruling party? Thank you.
It's a good one.
I don't know why you clap. Because it's a falsehood. It's a fundamental falsehood. When you don't vote, you have not voted, you are not going to, your ballot is not counted and it's not given to anyone because you didn't come. It's as simple as that. So the reason I'm asking why are you clapping, we seem to be attracted to falsehoods. They seem to energize us, and so on. But be that as it may, it's a falsehood. If you didn't come, it only means that I have less work to do, but I really would want to have your vote so that your view can be brought to bear on the future policy direction of the country. Because essentially, when you vote, you are making a choice in terms of the policy trajectory of the country. That's really what you're doing. You are saying, I don't like this set of policies that this party A is proposing. I don't like what the policies that party B are proposing. I like what party C is proposing as a means to take South Africa forward by means of public policy. So now, when you don't vote, those who take part are taking those decisions for all of us. That's the reality of the situation. Now, in terms of the first question that you put, maybe before I go to that question, and I was told to be brief, and I'm trying to be brief, but it's important that I reflect on this. Zimasa is correct. In the period where we are as a country, as the global world, you cannot ignore the momentum towards electronic voting. For that purpose, we are busy drafting a national policy discussion document, because the journey you take to reach the point of introducing electronic voting, it's as important as the decision itself. So you can destroy the process by the journey you took to reach that point. So it's important that it is an inclusive process, well consulted, and that at the point where we say, yeah, now we're implementing this thing, at least a substantial component of the South African society has had their views brought to bear on the ultimate decision. Now, it will be expensive. The setup costs, the setup capital will be high, but over time, it will become cheaper. Yeah, so it will become cheaper over time. The ballot paper, it's a very important commodity in an election because it is the means by which we record the voters' choices. Now, counting of those ballots is going to happen at the station where they were cast. In other words, there won't be a transportation of uncounted ballots. And that's quite important, that you don't transport uncounted ballots from the voting station to some other facility. Once counting is done, you complete a result slip in front of party agents. They have to countersign that result slip together with the observers. And what at that point becomes important because the will of the voter at that station is now encapsulated in that result slip. I'm not saying the ballots are no longer important, but what becomes the most important thing at that point is the result slip. Firstly, that it records the vote correctly, that party agents countersign, that observers countersign, and that result slip is eventually captured into the result system correctly. Now, there are obviously housekeeping issues that we are attending to, such as once we have the result slip, leaving the boxes there to come collect them later. Because those who have a very maleficent mind come, take the box, throw it away, take pictures and put on social media. So we are trying to alleviate the potential of that happening, that when we leave with the result slip at the voting station, we don't leave the boxes there for later collection, because history tells us that people will come, throw them away and say they were never counted, and they are stacked in certain party piles, and it means that a party Z is not favored, the party Y is favored. So thank you very much. Sorry, it took much long.
No, but you gave us clarity. We gave us clarity, which I appreciate. Any other question? We're going to take the last one, and then I also have my own saved question. Yes. Then from there, we're going to wrap our session up.
Okay. Hi guys, my name is Elsa. Okay, I wanted to ask well about the thing of you not voting and then your vote goes to the winning party or whatever thing that is. So now my question is that how does that pose as a threat to your organization as an independent like organization? And then also how does it also pose as a threat to our democracy as a whole?
It doesn't pose a threat to the IEC as an institution, but it does pose a threat to the legitimacy of our electoral outcomes, because you want a government whose mandate is derived from the majority of people in the country. You don't want a government that is constituted with a very low turnout, because its legitimacy becomes questionable. So if the trend of low voter turnout continues, we may have difficulties in future to have a government whose legitimacy is questionable, because it doesn't enjoy it doesn't enjoy the support of the majority. So the point really is that vote for whoever you think has best policies to eradicate the problems that South Africa is currently facing. Whoever you vote is your personal choice, but it's a choice that you make based on your assessment of which policies you believe better places South Africa on a development trajectory that can benefit all of us.
Thank you for that. Yes.
So my question is, how does the IEC ensure that its effort to try and stop this disinformation or misinformation are reaching all South Africans, regardless of their communities that are in?
Yes, the effort has to be multi-platform, because we are a society that uses different modes of communication for different things. For instance, radio is important in certain contexts, and in fact, research tells us that despite the growth of social media, the majority of citizens in the country receive news on radio. So one cannot undermine the efficacy of radio to disseminate information. So we have programs on radio that deals with all electoral aspects, including issues of this disinformation. We also have programs with political parties and civic society, where we offer educational training for them, again with a view to minimizing the potential for disinformation. But we also have events such as this, where we come to have this discussion, because part of the aim of this discussion is to create a consciousness about the correct usage of social media platforms and increasing our alertness to the possibility of disinformation. So it's a multinodal effort in radio, in social media platform itself, in face-to-face engagement such as this, as well as in political platforms.
I just want to come in quickly. And this is not a question, but maybe a suggestion to the chief. What we've started to, as more socioeconomic commentators come on board in terms of starting to create content around data-driven stories, what we're seeing is a pushback from institutions that don't see us as being as credible as news agency A, news agency B, etc. But we're the type of people that will come with a team that's even more than news agency A. We'll come with 4 people, etc. And we want access to that data, that information that maybe goes to that particular website. We also want it. But we're not given an opportunity because we're told you should register with a news organization. But then you go there and you say, I have blogs that have 250,000 followers, and they say, yeah, but so access for people like myself and others who create content that is data driven around the elections, we're being left out. Now, that's going to open the opportunity for us to create a narrative of nefarious actors to give people a feed that might not necessarily be true, because we don't have the same access as TV station A, radio station B, etc. So that I feel just before the elections is something that should be done, where you as a creator can register as an independent, right? Say these are my platforms, and then I know that I have a plugin for real stats. So for instance, a story comes out and says, in the Northern Cape, etc., people are not voting, or they haven't voted. There's access there. You guys have that back end, and you have some information that you give to media houses, but we don't have that information. And you still have time to pre-check and say, pre-vet these people, take us through the normal checks and say, guys, we know that you might not be a news organization, but if you're going to want to create credible content around the election in South Africa, if you want data, this is where we could basically, this is where you register. We know you might not be an organization, but you still have 2, 3, 4 million people that will listen to you.
I realize time is going off. You see, there are 2 things that have emerged from the discussion. Firstly, a possible webinar with fact checkers, so that we can share the framework with you with the correct details, and you can use that content creation work. And secondly, the issue about access to data, setting up a framework for it. I think that is still possible. I'm going to be rushing out soon thereafter, but my colleagues are here. If we can get your details so that we can set up those 2 things, I think they'll be of benefit to the process.
Thank you. Is there another hand?
Yeah, it's a question to Putizimel. So I just wanted to ask, what steps do you take to verify the accuracy of information before you share it with the large audience that you have? And yeah, the last question is, are there no political parties who have tried to give you some money, probably for narrative or anything?
Okay, first question. What normally happens is that what I normally look for, especially when it comes to statistics, Stats South Africa, they're great. They're actually really, really great. And I don't think we give them enough credit for that. They even are able to almost give narrative to stories. They even write their analysis in a story-like way that makes it so simple. So when it's about South Africa, when it's about the economy, population, etc., things like that, I start with Stats South Africa. And that's a start. With elections, IEC, great statistics. So you don't need to go far as a start. The other thing is that you've got to at least do a three source check. So the first one is website A. What else do they post on website A? Okay, maybe it's somewhat legit. I need to find another source. And also it's important to say, what type of information am I getting? Am I getting a first or second or third account of the thing? Because if someone says, Ntate Sai said something, there must have been a press conference. So I no longer need this. I need to go find a press release on an IEC that says either there was a this is what was said, etc. And the IEC does that quite well across their platforms. So I fact check myself. I know a lot of colleagues who don't. And they don't know how to spot these things. So yes, it's there. You check that. The second question, obviously parties have come. It's obvious. They realize the impact that you're able to do, and through that they want that for themselves. But I think impartiality is the best thing ever, because being a patriot of the country is more important. Because why would you want to pick a side early anyways?
Why would you want to pick a side early? That is the closing mark. Well, I'd just like to give my panelists final remarks or closing remarks. In short, you only have a minute per person.
Okay. First of all, social media is here to stay. We have to embrace it. We have to use it. But we have to use it responsibly. We've got to use it such that it's a platform for nation building, it's a platform for progress, and it's a platform for mobilizing us into civic consciousness.
Thank you.
I think for me, just to close off, let's definitely digitize the process, get more young people involved and on board. And then also, we need to put political parties on the stake, because their communication is one way, and we've allowed it to be one way. And more often than not, people ask questions and we don't get responses. So I think what the most important thing is to also hold them to account on digital and say we want answers.
Thank you.
From my end, I would say that disinformation is not new. It has always been there. It has only been amplified by the advent of social media platforms. So the onus and the responsibility rests on us to make sure that we fact check, verify before we post. If we are not sure about it, don't share. Thanks.
And a big thank you to our panelists, and a big thank you to you as the audience for joining us in this session. Well, I'm sure some of our panelists will still be around for you to get some answers. Maybe you were shy to ask a question, but from us, we really appreciate you for being here. Thank you.